I'm Beth Weinstein. I'm the observatory manager on PACE, and I'm going to be talking about the life of a spacecraft. Gary talked about the spacecraft earlier, and just as a reminder, that's everything on the space segment except for the instruments themselves. So that's the structure that supports the instruments. That's the thermal control, making sure they're not too hot, not too cold. It's the navigation, making sure everything's pointed the right way. So all those different things kind of are the support to make sure that the instruments are where they're supposed to be and in the right configuration in order for them to take the data that they need. So I'm just going to go year by year. So I've been on PACE for 7 years. And so every year was a little bit different, but I was on basically from the very beginning, just a couple of months after Jeremy, after they first declared this was a mission. And so I can kind of talk about what we've done every year and why it's taken 7 years, because it really shouldn't have. So another thing to note is on each slide I have how many people were working on the spacecraft. So that's not the whole mission, but the spacecraft portion, and when our launch date was, because you'll see that change over time as well with every year. So the first year, it was little pieces of people. So when I say 3 people, it was really like maybe 15 people, but like, you know, a little piece of their time. And everyone got together, and with very little information about what this mission was about, they were asked to design a spacecraft. So we didn't know how many instruments we had, or, you know, it was very little information. So there were a couple of concepts of the spacecraft along the way. You've kind of seen that with Eric as well for the instrument. So there were a few different options, and even the right one isn't. You'll see that changes over time as well. But that's what it looked like at the end of year 1. And so once we had this concept, we basically started a bunch of trades. So we had a certain budget we had to fit within, and certain science requirements, but we didn't know, like I said, how many instruments should we have? What type of science should they take? What resolution? What band should we use? There's, you know, S band or K band or X band for communication down to the ground, both commands that are sent up, data that comes back from those commands, so feedback as well as the science data itself. And then what data rates should we have? And all these trades, and there were like hundreds of these trades, and all these things affect all the different parts of the spacecraft. They affect the mechanical, the electrical, the thermal, all those different parts. So each time we had to do this trade, everyone on the team would provide an impact statement of what it would mean for them. How much would it change in terms of cost? What it would change in terms of the design? So the first year it was definitely just trade. And then the largest trade that we had is who should actually build the spacecraft. So when we first started, we didn't know who would build it. We actually did go out to industry. We asked for proposals back, as well as we ourselves at Goddard put together our own proposal of what we think it would cost us to build it ourselves. So year 2, headquarters decided that Goddard would build it. So that was great news for us. We like building spacecraft. So, but then the team had to kind of get to work a little bit more now that we were tasked to do this. You've heard about requirements, obviously design, but also this is year 2. We don't really have a design, but we had to buy parts. So we had to buy parts for our spacecraft with really not knowing anything about it. A lot of them take almost a year to get. And you've heard about engineering test units and things like that. They have to start pretty early. So we had to buy parts without really knowing what we really needed. But this was also our first year being canceled. You heard about our proposed cancellation. And so we took that seriously. And so we spent the year basically thinking of ways how we could save our mission. So you heard Gary talk about a couple of these, but maybe in more detail. So encryption, that's something we stuck with. So when we send our commands up to the spacecraft, they're encrypted. And that's just for security reasons. And that's something NASA's going to continue doing for its missions from now on. But that's not really a popular feature to have. So it's something that we've had to work through. It actually has been working really well. I would say yes, knock on wood. But it was something scary for us. It wasn't something that we had done before at Goddard on our, we'll call it in-house mission, so what Goddard had built before. Another one was launch vehicle rideshare. So this was also, it was both a cost-saving mission, but also proving something out. So this is an example where we would be the blue thing up top, but you'd have a lot of little smaller satellites and things around, and you would save costs on the launch by doing that. Other things, green propulsion, that it doesn't, it means it's safer for people to handle. It's more efficient than normal propulsion. Unfortunately, we didn't end up going with that one. It just wasn't quite there technically for us. Laser communications, another one we thought about, didn't go with that one. Delay tolerant networking, we do still have that one. And that was something that we were told, hey, if you put this on this mission, you will not be canceled. So we said, okay, we'll do that. Without really knowing what we do it. So we, part of our trades was actually just for political reasons as well, not just science or cost. But we would be canceled 3 more times after this. It was proposed to be canceled in the president's budget. So year 3, so the spacecraft design is still in flux. Right here in this design, we only have 2 instruments. We had as many as 5 instruments. And you could see how that would probably change how you would design a spacecraft. Right now, this only looks like it could fit 2 instruments because they all have to face the Earth, right? So anyway, it was definitely redesigning and deciding who would be in and negotiating. We worked with India at one point. We thought maybe we'd get an instrument from them. We thought headquarters might tell us we had to put an instrument on. So it was a lot of negotiating with a lot of different people. And then throughout the rest of the presentation, I'm going to talk about non-NASA versus NASA. I stayed away from the in-house and out-of-house, but non-NASA means out-of-house, we didn't build it, or NASA means in-house, we did build it. So basically, NASA, Goddard, cannot build every single thing that's on the spacecraft. So some of the stuff we have to go out to industry and ask. So around this time in year 3, this is when we started putting out proposals for the different pieces that we knew we weren't going to specifically build. And for NASA, for the things that we were going to build, we started kind of designing them as well. And this was actually a picture of the tilt that Eric had talked about, some whiteboard pictures of what this might look like. Once we decided it wasn't on OCI, it was going to be on the spacecraft, we kind of had to start at that point and start designing what it might look like. Year 4, so we finally figured out we had 3 instruments. So this is our mature design. I think we had talked about PDR versus CDR. So basically, this was the design and what it mostly looks like today at this point. For non-NASA, so we finally selected what those were going to be. But honestly, at the end of the day, there's only a couple of companies for each of our different components that can even build these things. And a lot of times, we would only have one person bid. And a lot of those people had never worked with NASA before. So it was a very interesting time. They had built stuff for ESA, the European Space Agency, but not for NASA itself. And so there was definitely a learning curve when we'd first go to meet with them. We had selected their proposal, and then we'd go talk, and we just spoke just a slightly different language that really, really mattered in terms of the interfaces. So we learned a lot very quickly in terms of those components and working with them. And then meanwhile at NASA, for our in-house, our NASA section, so we built engineering test units. You've heard a little bit about those before. And we built and tested them. This is an example of our transmitter. It was something, this was the ETU version. The flight version looks pretty similar to that. And then you can see, I didn't mention it, but specifically the people are growing pretty rapidly now for who's working on the spacecraft. Year 5. So for our non-NASA, for our out-of-house, we started visiting all those people, and these are all of our partners. There's a lot of them, both in the US and internationally. And like I said, we continue to refine their designs and have the same kind of reviews that we held with them. And then at NASA, we were finalizing some of our designs. We started building the flight components after the ETUs, the engineering test units, had been proven out. And we also built a flat satellite. We call it FlatSat. And that basically, we take those engineering test units that I mentioned, we put them on a table, and we have them talk to each other. And that's how we test out, even today, a lot of our procedures ahead of time before we test them out on the spacecraft itself. And also, during this time, we were furloughed for 6 weeks. So we weren't able to talk to any of the people on the right there. And so we did get a few surprises when we came back because they continued their work and had made some decisions that maybe weren't what we would have decided for them, but we made the best of it. Year 6, so this was year COVID. So unfortunately, we were at Goddard at NASA shut down for 5 months. I would say we worked longer hours during that time because there was, everyone knows there's no kind of beginning or ending of your day. So it's not like we didn't do anything for 5 months, but it really did hurt the development and of the spacecraft itself and of our in-house or NASA items. And so when we were back one activity kind of at a time. And one of our first activities and one of the main things we needed is the structure. They're the panels of the spacecraft. And we couldn't find one screw. And this delayed us another month. There's 70,000 packages at shipping and receiving. And it was very hard to find anything. So normally these packages would come in and they'd be delivered to people, but there were no people there to deliver to. So, but meanwhile, our out-of-house or our non-NASA partners, they continued working. So they actually delivered a lot of hardware. We held all the reviews we normally held that we would normally travel there. So we missed out on some great international travel, I'd say, for those people. But they kept working, and we were able to, through the means everyone used, Teams, et cetera, to have them build, and they delivered flight hardware while we were home. So people would go in, because we didn't want them stuck in this mess. People would go in specifically when we knew they were being delivered and handpick them up and carry them back to keep safe, because we actually didn't end up touching a lot of these things for another year after that. So then, year 7, we finally build the spacecraft. Oh, sorry. So the thing in the center, the silver part, is the propulsion module. And the things that have the red caps on the sides, those are the thrusters. So we use those to move the spacecraft, maneuver it. These are just the structure. These are just the panels themselves. We had put some components on when they were flat, and then we lifted the panels up and put it on. So that's just a picture of the prop module again. And then here's some better pictures of what it looks like. So now that everything's kind of put together as a box or a cube, the spacecraft, we can open up these panels. We're not allowed to say doors, panels. And you can see what it looks like. So just on the right here, the gold box, you might have recognized that from the ETU version. That's now the flight version is on. The blue boxes were built, so the gold box, the 2 blue boxes were built at NASA Goddard. The rest of the hardware that's on there, so those are part of our communication systems, and those were built by some of our international vendors. All the harnessing, so the cables that you see between all these things, those were all built at NASA Goddard as well. And it's a thing of beauty to try to route all those things. So that basically it's our power system is the blue box on the left, and our command and data handling box. So to send the commands that come in from the ground, goes through that and sent out to all the different components. Sorry, yes?
I have a question. Do you get a full ETU from international vendors, or do you take some of those components and move them over?
So sometimes it depends what we have in the contract. A lot of them also, if it's something that they've built before, they might just also have one available. And if it's something that we've had them built before for us, we might not need one because we either might have one from a previous mission or something like that. So it depends. But yeah, we try to, and I mean, they've been a lifesaver, I would say, having them when we did have them from the vendor. There's a couple that we don't, and it's been okay to not have it, but we have found a couple of things because of that. And then on the right, the white box that's horizontal, that's our battery. On the right side, there's like a white box and a circle of harnessing. That's our solar array drive assembly. That's going to be what the solar array is going to eventually attach to, and it'll lay on the face that you can't see. And we have a couple of booms, GPS, some other stuff. So anyway, it's in 1 year we accomplished a lot, I would say, after COVID there. And then finally, I mean, we've heard a bunch before. This isn't nearly everyone, but it really does take a team to do this. I have 16 leads that are underneath me, and each of them have teams themselves that they lead. And that's just the spacecraft team alone. I mean, we work with all the other teams that you'll see here, as well as ones that aren't represented. And that's all I had. Yes?
Yeah, what exactly happens when you get canceled, like for mission? I mean, because the program continues, so what would you mean if you get canceled?
Oh, so
Or it gets delayed, or
yeah, so that was, when we say we were proposed to be canceled in the president's budget. So the president puts forth what it thinks, what he, she, whatever thinks they want the budget to be based on their agenda. But then it has to go through the Congress, the House and the Senate. And so in the end, we weren't canceled any of the time. So basically between the House and the Senate and Congress, they passed the budget that always had us in there. And really, we were, not to get political, but we were canceled because we were an earth science mission. And we actually had to rebrand. I mean, we were used to say climate a lot when we first started. We had to kind of strike climate. We talked a lot about fisheries and industry, how we can have other benefits and not just look at climate change. But again, I think Congress again recognized the value. We also had a lot of support from Navy. So other parts of the government, as like I said, as well as industry that supported us and saved our mission each time. So it never actually got canceled, but I would say that first year was kind of, especially because it takes a while for them to actually pass the budget. So we would find out, maybe at one point, I don't know, March or something, that we were proposed to be canceled, but we might not know until October, or if there's a continuing resolution. I don't know if you know about government or US government, but it might take a year after we were first proposed to cancel to know that we weren't actually canceled. But so that first day, it actually did happen to be St. Patrick's Day, so I will admit there was some alcohol involved in receiving that notice, but it was business as usual. I'd say maybe a little bit downer. We joke about it. Then some of our other fellow missions at Goddard were proposed to be canceled, so we talked about having a cancellation party, bar crawl, at Goddard. So, but yeah, it all worked out. Yes?
I didn't realize that communications to control satellites were majority, you said a lot of them were not encrypted.
Yeah, so every mission I've worked on before that is not, there's other ways that they control communication, but it's not specifically encryption.
So that could mean somebody could send commands relatively easily?
People have sent commands before. It has happened, yes. Yeah, yes.
Spacecraft have an inertial navigation system? Is that how?
Yeah, so we have I think if this is what you're asking, so we have an IRU, but basically, yeah, we have a whole guidance, navigation, control suite of components that help us navigate and keep pointed the right way, momentum, dump, etc. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.